You ever watch your entire world shift in one conversation? I'm not talking about heartbreak or losing a job, I mean the moment. You realize the people you trusted most were never really on your side. Yeah, that kind of betrayal. What happened to me turned my whole idea of family upside down. And it all started with a wedding I thought I was helping plan. If you've ever felt pushed aside by the people you loved most, you're going to want to hear this. I'm Emily Parker, 35, and I live just outside Denver, Colorado. I never imagined that the person who once held my hand when I was too scared to sleep alone would be the same. One to tear my world apart. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you'd have sworn would protect you, then you already know that kind of pain. It's quiet, sharp, and unforgettable. My brother, Dylan, and I were close in that childhood movie kind of way. He was my safe place, my partner in crime, the one who always knew when I needed a laugh or a long walk. As we grew up, our lives took very different turns. I built a steady career in education, teaching middle school English. Dylan, on the other hand, dove into startups, the kind of high-risk, high-reward world that either makes you or breaks you. Still, despite the distance and differences, we stayed connected texting, FaceTiming, even surprising each other on birthdays. It was a bond that felt unshakable. That's what made what happened later feel like a punch I never saw coming. When Dylan told me he was getting married, I was thrilled, genuinely. I'd seen him get his heart broken more than once, and when he met Kayla, something in him changed. Softer, happier. He wanted me involved in the wedding right away. "You're going to be my best woman," he joked, grinning. "Not maid of honor, you outranked that." And just like that, I was in. I was all in. I started making lists, I researched venues, I helped him build budgets. I even lent money when vendors asked for upfront deposits. It didn't matter that I was saving for my own house. This was for Dylan, and I didn't think twice. That's what we do for family, right? We show up. We lift each other. We say yes without checking how heavy the ask is. But the moment that stayed frozen in my mind came months later, when Dylan looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We've decided it's best if you don't come to the wedding." That sentence was a quiet bomb. No anger, no warning, just destruction. If you're watching this and going through something that feels even remotely like this, I see you. Drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe because this story might give you the strength to draw the line you've been too afraid to. Dylan and I grew up in a home that didn't always feel safe. Our parents fought like it was their job. Money, control, sometimes nothing at all. I was the older one, just by 2 years, but old enough to learn how to hide in plain sight. I was the fixer, the peacekeeper. Dylan, he was the dreamer. Always off in his own world, building Lego cities while I tried to keep our real home from falling apart. We learned to rely on each other more than anyone else. While other kids were out riding bikes, we were dividing up dinner because mom forgot to shop again. I taught him how to do laundry when he was 8. He taught me how to laugh when things felt too heavy. We had this rhythm, a silent understanding that no matter what chaos happened around us, we had each other. It was us against the storm. That survival bond became our foundation. Even when we moved out and built our adult lives, we kept those habits alive. I'd call him to remind him to pay his car insurance. He'd Venmo me for coffee just because. Whenever I felt myself slipping into the weight of old memories, I'd call Dylan. His voice always brought me back to solid ground. And I liked thinking I did the same for him. So when he asked me to help with the wedding, it felt like a continuation of that bond. Planning his big day wasn't just a responsibility, it was an honor. I poured myself into it. I attended Zoom calls with florists, coordinated playlists, handled RSVPs when their wedding planner flaked. I wasn't just the best woman in title. I was running the back office of the entire wedding. That's probably what made the betrayal sting even deeper. When someone you love makes you feel invisible, after you've built your life around showing up for them, it doesn't just hurt, it changes you. The trust breaks. But so does your understanding of yourself. You start to ask, was I ever really part of this? Or just useful until I wasn't? At first, the changes were almost too subtle to name. A missed call here, a postponed planning meeting there. Dylan would respond with things like, "Kayla's just overwhelmed," or "We'll loop you back in next week." But next week kept slipping further away. I figured they were busy. Wedding stress is real, and people get tunnel vision. So I waited. I didn't want to be one more person demanding attention. Then I started seeing photos online. Kayla, her sister, and their friends doing things I was supposed to help with. Cake tastings, venue visits, a rehearsal dinner, walkthrough. The captions stung. So grateful for my bride tribe, I wasn't in a single one. I brushed it off at first, told myself they probably needed a girl moment, but deep down, I knew what it meant. I was being edged out. Still, I tried. I sent thoughtful reminders, lighthearted texts, just checking in. Messages that felt increasingly desperate the more they went unanswered. When I finally got a reply from Dylan, it was curt, formal. Even Kayla's handling most of it now. "Appreciate your help so far." So far? What did that mean? Was I done? I started doubting myself. Maybe I had overstepped. Maybe I was too involved. I replayed conversations, second-guessed every suggestion I'd made. I even apologized once for what, I'm still not sure. All I knew was the silence growing between us was no longer accidental. It was designed, and that's when the weight of it started settling in my chest. That low, dull ache of realizing you're not just being ignored, you're being intentionally excluded. And worse, no one had the courage to tell you why. There's something disorienting about feeling like you're losing someone, while you're still texting them, good morning. I kept showing up emotionally, financially, logistically, but every time I reached out, it felt like my hand passed through a ghost. No resistance, no warmth, just air. The brother who used to call me first with good news now answered like I was a client who had called without an appointment. The final straw, or what I thought was the final straw, came when I discovered they'd already had the final dress fitting, floral mock, and even sent out a second round of invitations. Without mentioning a word, Dylan said it was a miscommunication. But come on, you don't miscommunicate that much unless you're trying to. That's when I started to realize this wasn't about the wedding. It was about control, and I was no longer part of the circle that had it. I cried that night, not because I wasn't included, but because I couldn't figure out why. I didn't know what I'd done, or what I hadn't done. That's the thing about silent betrayals. They leave no fingerprints. Just bruises you can't explain to anyone else. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the spreadsheet I'd built for them, tabs for seating. Budget, vendors, playlists. I'd created it out of love. I wanted the day to be perfect. But now, it looked like a map to a party I wasn't even invited to. And still, part of me wanted to believe they'd come around. I clung to that hope like a raft, even as I was sinking. Because when you've built your identity around being dependable, the idea that someone doesn't want your help anymore, it feels like rejection of you. Not your input, not your work, but your presence. When Dylan finally asked to meet for weeks before the wedding, I told myself this was it. This was the moment we'd clear the air. Apologies would be made. Misunderstandings corrected. I wore the dress he'd always said made me look strong. I even practiced lines in the mirror like I was preparing for a courtroomtestimony.com. Clear, compassionate. But nothing prepared me for what he actually said. Kayla and I have decided it's better if you're not involved anymore. Not even as a guest. That was it. One sentence. No explanation, no time to brace. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest. And worse, he said it like he was reading off a script. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. I wanted to scream. I've supported you. I've helped you. I've paid for half this wedding. But instead, I just sat there, blinking, waiting for him to laugh and say, I'm kidding. Come on. But the punchline never came. Just silence. Cold, thick, final. That was the moment I realized it wasn't Kayla's decision. It wasn't even Dylan's. It was both of them. Together, the two people whose love I'd supported, whose day I'd planned, had unanimously decided I didn't belong. And the grief hit me like a wave. Not because I lost a wedding, but because I lost my place in his life. I left that coffee shop in a daze, walking 6 blocks before realizing I'd forgotten my keys on the table. I had to go back, retrace my steps, pretend I wasn't shattered. When I got home, I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor, hugging my knees, whispering the same question over and over. What did I do wrong? In the days that followed, I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to reach out. An aunt, a cousin, even one of Dylan's friends who knew how close we used to be. But the silence stretched. Apparently, I was being rewritten as difficult, dramatic, maybe even jealous. All the things people say when they want to justify mistreating someone, it wasn't just the loss of the wedding. It was the quiet unraveling of years of connection. Holidays, inside jokes, shared playlists. Now it felt like all of that could be erased with a single decision made behind closed doors. One that no one had the courage to challenge. Not even him. But eventually, clarity arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Sitting in my living room, holding the receipt from the honeymoon package I had secretly gifted them, $5,000 I couldn't get back. I realized something. I didn't do anything wrong. I showed up, I gave, I loved. Fully, honestly, and maybe that's the thing that scared them. People who want control often mistake love for leverage. But I wasn't trying to control anything. I was trying to celebrate my brother. My mistake was believing they valued that as much as I did. So I stopped apologizing, I stopped explaining, and I started reclaiming my energy, my finances, my voice. And that's when the story truly began to change. Growing up, people thought the Parkers had it all together. Big house, clean-cut kids, family dinners with polished silverware and folded napkins. We smiled in holiday cards and said all the right things in public. But the air inside our house was heavy, tense, controlled. My mom, Claire, ran the family like a PR firm. Appearances mattered more than connection. And if you dared disrupt the script, you paid for it. My dad, Charles, was quieter, the kind of man who always had a project in the garage. He wasn't unkind, just absent in the ways that counted. Whenever Mom drew her lines in the sand, he stepped back. I used to watch him sip his tea while she scolded Dylan for embarrassing the family, or lectured me about toning down my emotions. His silence made me feel like I was the only one awake in a dream. Everyone else pretended was fine. As kids, Dylan and I clung to each other like life vests. We had secret signals at the dinner table and a shared hiding spot behind the linen closet, where we'd whisper jokes during our parents' loudest arguments. I used to believe that surviving all that had bonded us forever. But now I see it differently. We survived together, but we also adapted differently. Dylan learned to keep the peace. Smile, nod, avoid conflict. He became the golden child, not by accident, but by strategy. I, on the other hand, questioned things. I spoke up. I called out the fake smiles and the cold silences. And for that, I became the difficult one. The one who always had a tone. The one who needed to learn her place. This wasn't new, but the wedding made it clearer than ever. The family system didn't break that day. It just stopped pretending to be whole. And I finally had to admit, I was never standing on solid ground to begin with. It started early, that feeling that if I didn't hold things together, everything might fall apart. When Mom forgot my birthday in 7th grade, I told her it was fine, that I hadn't planned anything anyway. When Dylan got suspended for skipping school, I was the one who forged the doctor's note. I became the cushion, the fixer, the glue. And I wore that role like armor. It followed me into adulthood. When Dad got sick, I handled the insurance calls. When Dylan's startup struggled, I helped him restructure his debt. I told myself this was love, that being needed meant being loved. But it wasn't love. It was duty twisted into dependency. And it made me the perfect target for emotional exploitation later. I didn't see it at the time. I thought I was being a good sister. I was the one who always showed up. Birthday planner, family mediator, emotional translator. Even Kayla once joked, "You're the wedding MVP already." But deep down, I knew my worth to them depended on what I could give, not on who I was. It's subtle, how that kind of dynamic eats away at your self-worth. You stop asking, "Am I okay?" and start asking, "What more can I do?" You think if you just try harder, they'll finally notice how much you care. But it doesn't work like that. People who use you don't stop when you give more. They only take faster. And maybe that's what scared them most. The moment I started asking questions. The moment I said, "Hey, I don't feel included," or "That hurt." Because when your value depends on silence and service, speaking up makes you dangerous. I wanted to believe Kayla was just stressed. Planning a wedding is intense, right? Maybe she didn't mean to exclude me. Maybe she didn't realize how much I'd already done. But the more I replayed the timeline, the harder it was to ignore. She did know. She did see. And still, she made the choice to shut me out with a smile. From the beginning, Kayla was polite, poised, and oddly performative. She'd say thank you with a tone that sounded more like, "That'll be all." She'd pretend to include me in decisions, then override them the next day. With Dylan and I talked, and we've decided. I started feeling like an employee at their wedding, not family, not friend. Just staff? Worse. She knew how to manipulate perception. She never said anything outright cruel, but she'd drop comments like, "It's so sweet how you always want to help. You must really need to stay busy." Or, "You're always so organized." I could never be that controlling. Little digs disguised as compliments. Little traps I kept walking into. At first, Dylan would laugh them off. Then he stopped laughing. Then he stopped noticing. Slowly, he started repeating her language. "You get too intense sometimes. Maybe you're taking this too personally." And just like that, I wasn't his partner in crime anymore. I was a liability, a disruption to the image they were curating. Looking back, I don't think Kayla ever saw me as family. I think she saw me as competition. Not for Dylan's love, but for control of the narrative. And in a family like mine, the one who controls the narrative wins. Growing up, my dad wasn't the loud one, but that didn't mean he wasn't part of the problem. His silence was the wallpaper to every painful moment in our house. When Mom snapped at me or dismissed something I cared about, he'd sigh or shift in his chair but never speak. His comfort zone was passivity, and for years, I mistook that for peacekeeping. I used to rationalize it. He's just trying not to make things worse. But as I got older, I realized that in his efforts to avoid conflict, he chose comfort over courage every single time. And the result? Mom's version of reality went unchecked. Her control grew stronger, her narrative tighter, and we all learned to live around it. So when Dylan told me they'd all talked about it and agreed it was best, I didn't attend the wedding. I asked him, flat out, was Dad part of that? And he just shrugged. He didn't fight it. That moment hit like a slap. Not only was I excluded, my dad, the one person I hoped might step up, hadn't even raised his voice. I wasn't asking him to stage a rebellion. I just wanted to know that someone in my family thought what was happening was wrong. But he never called. Never sent a message. Not even a quiet. I know this isn't fair. His silence wasn't neutral. It was approval by omission. That's when I realized in families like mine, silence isn't absence. It's complicity. And for the first time in my life, I started to grieve not just the wedding, but the entire idea of the father I thought I had. What's wild is how erasure doesn't always look like screaming matches or slam doors. Sometimes it's just nothing. No updates. No invitations. No more group texts with planning updates. Just a slow fade into invisibility. I started checking the wedding website daily. Looking for any sign, I was still part of it. My name disappeared from the bridal party tab sometime in March. No one mentioned it, no explanation, no heads up. It was just gone. I stared at the screen for 15 minutes, refreshing it over and over, thinking maybe it was a glitch. But it wasn't. They had written me out of their story, and no one even bothered to tell me. The Instagram posts hurt most. Kayla's curated highlight reel of bachelorette dresses, bridal boxers, and bridesmaids brunches. All color-coordinated, filtered, joyful. I wasn't in a single frame. I didn't even get tagged. The comments were full of hearts and squad goals from people who knew I was supposed to be in those photos too. It's strange how digital exclusion can feel so personal. I mean, it's just a website, right? Just pixels? But when you've poured your heart and time into something, and your presence is scrubbed away like a typo, it feels like being erased from your own family's history. I stopped checking the site after that. I deleted the Instagram app, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. And I didn't know how to keep witnessing a celebration that felt like a funeral for my relationship with my brother. Even after all that, I still paid the invoice for the string quartet. I'd promised them that gift months ago. It was supposed to be a surprise, a romantic touch for Dylan and Kayla's ceremony, a way to make the moment unforgettable. The bill arrived 2 weeks before the wedding, and despite everything, I wired the payment. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was a reflex from years of being the reliable one. But part of me still believed that doing the right thing would mean something. That maybe, just maybe, the kindness would break through whatever wall had gone up between us. No one acknowledged it. Not Dylan, not Kayla, not even a generic thanks email. The only confirmation I received was from the musicians themselves. A polite note saying they were excited to be part of the couple's big day. They had no idea I wouldn't be there to hear them play. I stared at that email for a long time. It felt like a metaphor. I had orchestrated beauty, added value, tried to make something special, and I wasn't even invited to witness the outcome. I had paid for the music, but I wasn't allowed to hear the song. That's when the grief morphed into something else: clarity. This wasn't about an oversight. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. I was being cut out. And I'd have to decide whether to keep proving my worth, or finally start protecting it. If you've ever felt like the people you've loved most chose to forget your name, I hope you know you're not alone. These stories matter. Your story matters. If this video is resonating with you, consider hitting like and subscribing to the channel. It helps more people find stories like this and lets us keep telling them. And if this story has truly touched you, feel free to click the super thanks button just below the video. It's a small way to support the channel and keep content like this alive. Now, here's what happened next. There's something uniquely painful about realizing you've been left out after the moment has passed. Like when a colleague casually asked, "How is the menu tasting?" And I had to fake a smile, pretending I had just missed it. Only later did I find out it happened last Sunday. I hadn't been invited, not forgotten, just left out, by design. The silence started to speak for itself. No more check-ins, no more "Hey, what do you think of this idea?" Just distant updates that felt like polite PR announcements. I wasn't part of the process anymore. I was an outsider. And worse, no one seemed to care if I noticed. At first, I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. They're just overwhelmed. It's not personal. But that justification started to feel like a bad habit. A reflex I couldn't stop even when the evidence screamed otherwise. It's exhausting, trying to make excuses for people who've already closed the door behind them. Then came the group photo. A picture from Kayla's bridal luncheon, all the bridesmaids, her mom, her sister, even Dylan's college friend Rachel. Everyone but me. I stared at the photo longer than I'd like to admit. Not because I wasn't in it, but because I hadn't even known it was happening. That's when the denial cracked. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't stress. This was erasure. And the more I tried to stay gracious, the more invisible I became. Rumors travel fast and families faster when someone's working overtime to rewrite the narrative. It started subtly. A cousin asked if I was okay. "Kayla said you'd been really overwhelmed and needed space." I blinked. That wasn't true. I'd been showing up at every turn. But the seed had been planted and I wasn't the one watering it. Then another relative told me Dylan had mentioned I was stepping back from the wedding. "He said you offered, actually," she added gently. My stomach dropped. I hadn't stepped back. I was being pushed, but I hadn't said anything publicly, hadn't made a scene. So their version became the version people believed. I tried to reach out to Dylan, sent a voice message, honest, vulnerable.com, no response. When I finally texted again, he replied with one line: "It's not a good time to stir up drama." Drama. That word, cut like a blade. It framed me as the problem, the storm, the disruption. It made everything that came next feel inevitable. Suddenly, I wasn't the dependable sister. I was too emotional, hard to work with, controlling. It's a terrifying thing to realize that silence can be weaponized, that your refusal to fight is being framed as guilt. I wasn't just being removed from the wedding. I was being recast in real time, not as the person who gave, who planned, who stayed loyal, but as the one who made everything difficult. It wasn't just exclusion, it was character assassination. I should have walked away. I know that now, but at the time, I still believed there was hope. That if I just stayed kind, stayed helpful, stayed me, they'd come back around. So I kept answering emails. I finalized the welcome gifts for out-of-town guests. I handled the transportation for their out-of-state friends. Quietly, faithfully, I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because love is messy and loyalty is stubborn. Because there's a part of me that still believed I could fix it, not the wedding, but the relationship. The bond we had since childhood, that invisible thread I thought would never snap. I even sent a gift to their apartment, a framed sketch of the church they were getting married in. Dylan loved it. He texted me, "That was beautiful. Thank you." It was the last real message I got from him before everything went silent again. Friends told me I was being too generous. They don't deserve your help. But it wasn't about deserving. It was about the part of me that didn't know how to not help. That hadn't learned yet that love without boundaries isn't loyalty. It's self-abandonment. And the worst part, somewhere deep down, I kept hoping that showing up would earn me a seat back at the table. That if I gave enough, loved enough, tolerated enough, they'd see me again. But they didn't. They saw what I could offer, not who I was. A month before the wedding, I got a cheerful invitation in the mail, a glossy, blush-colored card that read you're invited to Kayla's bridal shower. The host name printed at the bottom wasn't mine. It was Rachel's, Dylan's old college friend. I sat there staring at it, stunned. Hosting the shower had always been my role. We had talked about it months ago. I hadn't been consulted on the venue. The menu, the guest list, nothing. I was just one of the guests now, like an acquaintance. I texted Dylan to ask what had changed. No response. I texted Kayla a short, polite message asking if I could contribute anything. She replied with a single sentence, "Rachel has it covered, but thank you." I showed up anyway. I wore the dress I had bought months earlier. The one I originally picked with Kayla. I brought a gift from her registry. Something thoughtful, something personal. And when I walked in, no one even looked surprised to see me. But they also didn't see me. I felt like a ghost at a party I'd helped plan but wasn't allowed to touch. They'd made party favors with everyone's name on them. Customized bracelets that spelled out Bride Tribe in little gold charms. Mine was missing. "Oh, must have been a shipping error," Rachel said with a forced laugh. I nodded and smiled. But in my chest, something caved in. I left early that day, said I had a migraine, but the truth. I couldn't breathe in a room that was so full of love I used to be part of and now was being forced to witness from the sidelines. After the bridal shower, I drove straight to my best friend's place. Jenna opened the door and took one look at me before pulling me into a hug. I didn't cry at first. I just sat on her couch, numb, staring into my untouched tea. And then, without planning it, the words came out, "I don't think they want me at the wedding." She didn't say, "Don't be dramatic," or, "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." She just nodded and said, "I know." And hearing that, the honesty, the validation hit harder than the exclusion itself. For weeks, I'd been pretending I wasn't falling apart, that maybe if I waited long enough, the phone would ring. But the silence was the answer. I listed everything I had done, the deposits I paid, the planning I contributed, the effort I kept showing up with. Jenna listened, her expression growing tighter with every detail. "And they never even thanked you?" she asked. "Not once," I whispered. "Not a single time." We sat in that stillness for a long time. Eventually, she said something I'll never forget. "You're trying to love people who've only learned how to take that line." Cracked something open in me, not just about Dylan and Kayla, but about my whole life. I wasn't being forgotten. I was being erased on purpose. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of that betrayal. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just gotten home from work when I saw the notification pop up on my phone. New wedding update from Dylan and Kayla's registry. Out of habit, I clicked. It was a digital RSVP confirmation for guests who had been formally invited. I scrolled through the list, my name wasn't there. No envelope, no Yvette, no mistake. It was official. I hadn't been invited to the wedding. Not just demoted, not just minimized, removed, erased. Blocked from a day I had helped build from the foundation up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, barely breathing. There were no words, no confrontation, no final conversation, just a quiet, deliberate decision made behind my back, confirmed by an email alert meant for someone else. I checked my mailbox the next day, just in case. Nothing. Not even a thank you card. Just silence. I wish I could tell you I screamed or called or made a scene, but I didn't. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started canceling every reservation I had made on their behalf. The string quartet, the welcome baskets, the luxury airport transport I had arranged as a gift. One by one, I began to pull the thread. And as each refund processed, each confirmation email landed in my inbox. I realized they hadn't just uninvited me from the wedding, they had released me from a role I was never supposed to carry alone. And for the first time, I started to breathe again. The week after I realized I wasn't invited, I tried to shift back into routine. I went to work, answered emails, watered my plants, but every little moment felt heavy, off, like grief was a constant buzz in the background of my life. And then, one afternoon, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in a while. My coworker, Mel, Mel's sister, runs a boutique. The boutique where Kayla had bought her wedding dress. "How is the fitting?" she asked me casually in the break room. "Your brother's fiancé looked so happy." I froze. "Fitting? What fitting?" Mel's smile faltered. "Wait, weren't you there?" I smiled the way people smile when they've just been gut punched. I had a scheduling conflict. I lied. But inside, I was spiraling. That was supposed to be our moment. Months ago, Kayla had asked me to come to the dress fitting. I had taken a half day off work to be there. But the date kept shifting. The texts got vaguer. Eventually, the invite just stopped coming. Later that night, I confirmed it. They'd gone without me. Kayla's mom, her sister, and Rachel, of course. I wasn't even an afterthought, just edited out of a memory I was supposed to help create. That night, I sat on my bed, scrolling through old messages, trying to find some sign, any sign that they had once meant what they said. But all I could find was silence. And the more I looked, the more I realized the absence wasn't accidental. It was intentional. And it had been going on far longer than I was willing to admit. They say once you notice a pattern, you can't unsee it. That was exactly what happened when I started digging through old emails, messages, and calendar invites. I hadn't planned to investigate, I just wanted to remind myself that this relationship had once been real. But what I found left me stunned. Emails that were once warm and collaborative turned formal without explanation. Calendar invites quietly disappeared. Shared docs had been deleted or restricted. Group messages went from we to I to I. Nothing. But what shook me most was the missing communication. So many little things that had never reached me. I dug deeper. Found a catering deposit that had been canceled and rebooked under Kayla's sister's name, the one I had originally coordinated. A playlist doc I created had been copied, rebranded, and republished by Rachel. My fingerprint was on everything, and nowhere. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Then I saw it. A message forwarded to Kayla from someone else, still sitting in an old thread I had access to. It was a screenshot of me joking. "Don't worry, I'll rein in the chaos like I always do." It was meant to be funny, supportive. But the caption added below, it chilled me. "See what I mean? She always has to take over." That's when I knew. I wasn't just being erased, I was being reframed. Recast as overbearing, dramatic. The liability, and no one had even asked me who I was before they believed the version they were sold. I wish I could say that realization made me furious. That I stood up, slammed my laptop shut, and reclaimed my power in one breath. But that's not how healing works. Instead, I just sat there, stunned, wondering how many signs I had ignored. How many little gut feelings I'd smothered with logic. With hope. With love. Because deep down, I had known. Not all of it. Not the full scope. But I had felt it. In the way Dylan stopped making eye contact when I asked about wedding plans, in the way Kayla's tone shifted when I offered help, in the way I started apologizing for showing up too much. Or not enough. Or just at all. I had betrayed myself by staying silent, by being agreeable. By putting everyone else's comfort above my own voice, I had handed them the script and said, "It's okay if I'm not the lead. Just let me stay in the background." But they didn't keep me backstage. They wrote me out completely. I wasn't mad at them yet. I was mad at myself for shrinking, for hoping, for clinging to the fantasy that love was enough to override manipulation. And that night, as I stared out at the city lights, I whispered something I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. They don't care how much I gave. They only care that I didn't stay silent forever. That was the moment something in me cracked open. Not broken, just awake. After that night, I stopped texting first. I stopped emailing. I stopped offering solutions. And that's when I realized something even more painful than the betrayal itself. No one noticed. Days passed, then a week. No check-in from Dylan, no lighthearted text from Kayla, no invitation to join a final planning call, nothing. It was like I'd been a utility. Not a person useful until no longer needed. Their silence had a rhythm to it. A practiced beat that made it clear I wasn't missing. I was removed. And the more I sat with that, the more I began to understand just how much of my love had been taken for granted. I had let my worth be defined by how much I could offer. And in return, I got edited out of a life I had helped build. Every "it's just a wedding" comment I heard from people who didn't understand. It wasn't about a day. It was about a pattern, a family dynamic that finally showed its face without apology. I began journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. At first it was messy and bitter, just scribbles of questions and grief. But soon, it turned into clarity. Truth written in ink. I wasn't angry for being excluded. I was angry that I had accepted so little for so long and called it love. And through that clarity, a quiet strength started to grow. Not loud, not defiant, just real. Like waking up from a very long, very painful dream. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one that had held my planning notebooks. Invoices, fabric swatches, and opened a blank page. I wrote at the top, what I will no longer carry. And below it, for the first time, I wrote a list not of to-dos or reminders, but of boundaries. I will no longer explain my worth to people who benefit from doubting it. I will no longer stay quiet to keep others comfortable. I will no longer mistake proximity for connection. I will no longer be a placeholder in my own life. I will no longer show up where I'm not welcome. It wasn't just cathartic, it was revolutionary. That list was the first thing I'd done for me in months, maybe years. It didn't fix the heartbreak, but it reminded me that I still had a say, that I could rewrite the rules I'd been living by. I taped the list to my fridge, and every morning that week, I read it aloud before work. It was my promise to myself, no more shrinking, no more hoping people would see what I never said out loud. From now on, I would step back, not as punishment, but as self-preservation. And strangely enough, that's when things began to move. It started with a message from a mutual friend. Then a call from an aunt I rarely heard from. I heard what happened, she said quietly. You okay? I didn't ask how she knew. I just answered honestly for the first time. Not really, but I'm getting there. Then came the late-night text from Dylan's friend Marcus, someone who'd always been kind to me. I don't know what's going on, but this whole thing doesn't feel right, he wrote. I wish you were still involved. You were the only one who actually cared about making this meaningful. I stared at the message for a long time. Word was getting out. Not because I was speaking up publicly, but because the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Especially when people start comparing stories, timelines, and tones. The facade only works if no one asks questions. And people were finally starting to ask. It wasn't vindication yet, but it was a start. Small beams of light cracking through the carefully curated silence they had built around me. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I wasn't even fighting to be included anymore. I was just done pretending I didn't matter. And for the first time in months, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The air felt different, lighter, like maybe I was coming home to myself. Dylan finally texted me. After weeks of silence, he wrote, "Can we talk, Kayla? And I think it's time." I stared at the screen for a long time. No apology, no warmth. Just that careful, cold phrasing, "think it's time," like I was a checklist item. I agreed to meet, but I didn't say much. My heart was already bracing for another wound. We met at our parents' house like it was neutral ground. When I arrived, I noticed the odd stillness right away. Dylan was in the living room. Kayla was there too. And then, to my surprise, Rachel. Even our mom sat at the end of the couch. Arms crossed, looking vaguely triumphant. It didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like an ambush. I sat down slowly, my stomach tightening. "What's going on?" I asked. Dylan cleared his throat. "We wanted to give you clarity. We've all discussed this, and we've agreed that your presence at the wedding would be disruptive." That word disruptive landed like a slap, as if I'd crashed their party, as if I hadn't helped build it. I turned to Kayla. She looked everywhere but at me. Mom spoke next. "We've tried to include you, Emily, but you've made this about you. Your ideas, your expectations, your drama. This wedding is about them." And then Rachel chimed in. Casually, "It's just not the energy Kayla needs before the big day." For a moment, I said nothing. I just looked at each of them, people I had once considered family. Now, strangers in familiar clothes. And I realized they had already made their decision. This wasn't about talking. This was about telling me, "You're out." Everything in me wanted to scream, to remind them of the money, the planning, the sleepless nights, the small sacrifices I'd made just to make this day beautiful for them. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath and sat back. My calm made the room fidgety. They expected outrage. They expected a scene. What they didn't expect was clarity. "Okay," I said, folding my hands in my lap. "Let me make sure I understand. After everything I've contributed, emotionally and financially, after months of being gaslit, excluded, and lied to, you're saying the best move now is to pretend I never mattered." Silence. Dylan's eyes darted, Kayla's lips parted, but no words came. "I'm not even asking to be a bridesmaid anymore," I added. "I'm asking you to say out loud what you've been doing behind my back. That you've been slowly cutting me out because it made things easier for you. Just say it." Mom started to speak, but I cut her off gently. "No, not you, Dylan." He looked like a boy again, small, cornered. It got complicated, he mumbled. You were making things harder, and we needed peace. That's all. I nodded slowly. So your peace required my erasure. Got it. There was nothing left to defend. I didn't beg. I didn't bargain. I stood up, gathered my purse, and said quietly, "Thank you for confirming what I already knew." And then I walked out, not because I lost, but because I finally stopped fighting for a seat at a table that was always meant to fold without me. I walked down that familiar driveway, past the roses Mom planted in the spring, past the front steps Dylan and I used to race up as kids. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage I'd just exited, script still in hand. I sat in my car, hands trembling, and let the silence wrap around me. That's the thing no one tells you about clarity. It doesn't always come with relief. Sometimes it comes with grief. I didn't cry for what happened in that living room. I cried for what had been happening all along. For the way I'd built my identity around being someone else's support system and forgot to build a foundation of my own. When I got home, I opened my laptop and canceled the final thing I still had control over. The honeymoon package, first-class flights, private villa, a sunset dinner cruise, gone. I transferred the funds back to my account with shaking fingers. And with each confirmation email, I felt the weight of the past year start to slide off my shoulders. Later that night, I turned off my phone. No more texts. No more half apologies. No more trying to manage everyone else's emotions while mine drowned quietly in the background. I wasn't angry, I was done. Done performing, done fixing. Done begging to be seen. I didn't lose a wedding that day. I walked away from a cycle. And that was the beginning of something much bigger than I knew at the time. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls and messages, mostly from my mom. Then Kayla, a short one from Dylan. Let's talk when things cool down. But I didn't answer. I'd said everything that needed to be said. And frankly, I was tired of being the one who had to absorb the mess, then smooth it over. Their messages didn't sound regretful. They sounded inconvenienced. Like I'd disrupted a plan they assumed I'd silently accept that I'd fold. The way I always did. That I'd come back around with a smile and make things easy again. But this time, I didn't. I spent the day packing up everything related to the wedding receipts. Sketches, fabric samples, lists, all of it went into a box. A part of me wanted to burn it, but I didn't. Not because I needed to keep it, but because I needed to see it. To acknowledge what I gave, what I tried, what I survived. And in that box, I tucked a note to myself. One line. You were never hard to love. They just loved control more than connection. It felt like reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd given away. The illusion was gone. The fantasy that love would protect me from betrayal, shattered. But in its place, something better was starting to form. Truth. What I didn't expect was how fast the truth would start to catch up with them. Within days, people began reaching out, some confused, others angry. An aunt asked why I wasn't listed in the final wedding program. A family friend texted, "Did you really back out last minute? Doesn't sound like that was the moment I knew." They were spinning a version, but it wasn't sticking. Someone leaked the real story. Maybe it was Marcus. Maybe a cousin. Maybe just someone who finally decided silence wasn't kindness. Either way, the narrative shifted. People started asking questions, not just about the wedding, but about the pattern. I didn't respond to every message. I didn't need to. I had nothing to prove anymore. The truth was doing its job. Slowly, painfully, but persistently. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone's reputation. I just stepped out of the fog. And that alone seemed to shake the foundation. And then came the call I wasn't expecting from Kayla. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice, tight and breathy, I didn't know it had gone this far. I just wanted boundaries. I didn't want this. It sounded more like a PR statement than remorse. I didn't call back. That's when I finally understood something deep in my bones. You don't have to explain your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the greatest closure is choosing not to participate in their performance anymore. By the time the wedding actually happened, I was 200 miles away, spending the weekend in the mountains with my best friend, Jenna. No phones, no scrolling, no last-minute updates. Just tall trees, cool air, and the sound of my own breath finally settling into peace. I thought it would hurt more. I thought I'd feel the sting, knowing I wasn't in the pictures, in the speeches, in the dance. But to my surprise, I felt light. I wasn't missing anything. I was protecting everything, my peace, my boundaries, my future. Jenna poured me a glass of wine that night and said, "You didn't lose your family. You lost the illusion that they were safe." And I nodded, letting that sink in. Because what they took from me, the spotlight, the title, the seat at their table didn't compare to what I was reclaiming now. Clarity, autonomy, and the ability to start again without apology. The version of me that used to bend until she broke, she didn't survive this year. And thank God, because the version of me who walked away, she's not weak. She's awake. That was the night I finally let it all go, not in bitterness. Not in defeat, but with the quiet strength of someone who now knows her worth isn't conditional. It's inherent, and it's non-negotiable. Healing didn't come in a flash of inspiration. It came in small, awkward, quiet moments. Cooking my own dinner instead of snacking, turning my phone off without guilt, letting a Sunday pass without checking anyone's social feed. I wasn't rebuilding the life I had. I was building one I hadn't dared to imagine before. At first, it felt like loneliness. But over time, I realized it was space, the kind I'd never allowed myself to have. My days weren't filled with damage control anymore. I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was free to make my own plans, not just fit into other people's chaos. I returned to therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted help understanding the parts of me that had accepted so little for so long. We talked about boundaries, but also about identity, about how I'd learned to earn love through usefulness, and how exhausting that currency had become. My therapist said something that stuck with me. It's not just grief over who they became, it's grief over who you had to be to stay connected to them. And wow, that landed hard. I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. But I was done with that now. Healing wasn't about revenge or reconciliation. It was about choosing a different rhythm, one that started and ended with my own heartbeat. Not everyone disappeared when the dust settled. Some people stayed. Jenna, of course, who'd seen every tear and every angry rant. But also Marcus, who messaged on the wedding day just to say, thinking of you. You deserve better. That simple text meant more than 1,000 hollow apologies. And then there were the unexpected ones. A cousin I hadn't seen in years who sent me a voice memo after hearing what happened. I don't know why this got to me so deeply. She said, maybe because I felt erased in our family too. That message stayed with me. It reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. I started to see patterns more clearly, not just in my family, but in my friendships, my work, even in how I talked to myself. Every time I dismissed my own needs or over-explained my boundaries, I saw it for what it was. Old survival habits trying to protect me from rejection. But I didn't need those habits anymore. I had survived. I had left. And the people still in my life weren't there because they needed something from me. They were there because they saw me. Fully flawed, human, and still worthy. It was a different kind of love than I was used to. Softer, quieter, not performative, but real. And it gave me permission to stop proving myself. For weeks, I kept wondering if Dylan would call, if Kayla would text, if anyone would say, we were wrong, we're sorry. But the apology never came. And eventually, I realized I didn't need it. Apologies are beautiful when they're genuine. But waiting for one to heal you, that's giving power to the same people who hurt you. And I was done handing them that power. So I released the need for closure from them. And I gave it to myself instead. I sat down one night and wrote Dylan a letter. Not to send, just to say the things I never got to say out loud. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I didn't want to carry his silence anymore. I didn't want to spend another day editing myself for people who preferred the quiet version of me. When I finished, I folded the letter and burned it in a little dish on my balcony. The smoke curled into the air like a whisper. Let go, and I did. Not with bitterness, with grace. And that was the real beginning of healing. When I stopped needing them to come back and made peace with the fact that I'd moved on. The more I let go of the need to be needed, the more space I created for myself. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to rush to fix someone else's crisis, but because I wanted slow mornings. Sunlight through my window, music that matched my mood. Coffee made the right way, not in a hurry. I picked up old hobbies I hadn't touched in years. Painting, reading novels that had sat untouched on my shelves. Walking without a destination. I know it sounds small, but these things made me feel human again. Not just useful, but alive. I was remembering who I was before everything had become about someone else's wedding. Someone else's needs. I got more intentional about who I gave my energy to. I didn't ghost anyone. I didn't need to. I just stopped forcing connections that only moved in one direction. If someone wasn't willing to meet me halfway, emotionally, energetically, I stopped crossing the bridge for them. And in that new space, better people started showing up. People who didn't expect me to carry the emotional labor for the room. People who didn't flinch when I used the word boundary. People who saw my strength and didn't try to dim it. They matched it. Showing up for myself wasn't loud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about repair. Quiet, sacred, radical repair. And it changed everything. Before all this happened, I didn't even realize how much of my identity was wrapped up in being picked. Chosen as the helper. The reliable one. The steady support beam holding everyone else up. But when Dylan and Kayla left me out with no apology, no explanation, I realized I had built my self-worth on something that could be taken away in a single decision. So I started unlearning that, slowly, imperfectly, but intentionally. I reminded myself, I don't need to be included in someone else's circle to be whole. I am not a backup plan. I am not optional. I am not someone you can lean on and then discard when the lights come up and the audience claps. My value doesn't shrink just because someone else refuses to see it. Their blindness isn't a reflection of my worth. It's a reflection of their limits. That was a truth I had to repeat like a mantra, especially on the hard days when old habits whispered, maybe if you were just a little easier, a little quieter. But I wasn't made to be small, and I wasn't built to beg. I was built to stand. And finally, I was learning how to do that without apology. That was the freedom I didn't know I'd been chasing this whole time. I won't pretend it all disappeared. There were still days when I saw a photo from the wedding, and it stung. Not because I wanted to be there anymore, but because I remembered when I thought I would be. That version of me, full of hope and loyalty and blind trust, she still lives somewhere in me. And I honor her now, instead of resenting her. But over time, the grief softened. It stopped roaring and started humming. A quiet reminder of how far I've come. I can talk about it now without crying. I can hear their names without flinching. I don't need to erase the memories. I just don't carry them like wounds anymore. It's funny, for so long, I thought healing would feel like closure. But what it really feels like is clarity. Like walking through fog and suddenly seeing the horizon again. I still don't have all the answers. I don't know if I'll ever fully repair what was broken with Dylan. But I know this. I am no longer broken with myself. That's the real win. Not revenge, not vindication, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to be what everyone else needs and start becoming who you were always meant to be. And that was worth every painful step. In the months that followed the wedding, life kept moving, as it always does. Dylan and Kayla went on their honeymoon, posted curated highlights, started their life together like I had never been part of it. No public fallouts, no acknowledgement, no reaching out. Just a clean edit. And for a while, that silence felt brutal, like I'd been written out of my own family's script. The girl who disappeared, the one we don't really talk to anymore, but then I realized I didn't have to interrupt their narrative. I could just step out of it, quietly, powerfully. I didn't need a reunion. I didn't need them to miss me. I wasn't building a life that waited for their regret to catch up. I was building a life where I was the center, not the sidekick, not the emotional workhorse me. I went on with my life. I deepened my friendships. I hosted my own small birthday gathering with people who actually showed up, not out of duty, but joy. And the love in that room. It wasn't performative. It was real. That was the moment I stopped mourning the people who walked away and started celebrating the ones who stayed. 6 months later, Dylan called. I let it go to voicemail. He texted after, I owe you a conversation, if you ever want to talk. And honestly, a part of me did. But not for closure. Not for answers. Just to hear my brother's voice one more time and remember the good we once had. So I agreed to meet. We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, not like siblings, not like enemies. Just two people who had hurt each other in different ways. He looked tired, older, like someone who had lived through more than he expected. He apologized. It was clumsy, slow, but real. I believed the wrong people, he said, and I let it happen because it was easier than facing the truth. I nodded, letting the silence stretch. I didn't rush to fill it. I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't, but it was real. And that was enough. I miss you, he added. I looked at him for a long time. I miss who we were, I said gently. But I don't think I can go back there. He nodded. No argument, no begging, just understanding. And in that quiet moment, I realized I didn't need to rebuild what was broken. I just needed to know that I was right to walk away. Not every story ends with reconciliation, but some do evolve not into what they were, but into something new. Dylan and I don't talk every day. We don't pretend everything's fine, but we've started finding small ways back into each other's lives. A text on a holiday, a photo from childhood shared in a moment of nostalgia. There's no pressure, no expectations, just slow, cautious reconnection. And that feels honest, real, and most of all, mutual. We're both different people now. Wiser, a little more scarred, but maybe also a little more whole. I don't regret what I walked through. Not anymore, because it gave me the gift of awakening. It forced me to look at my patterns, my values, my boundaries. And it taught me that sometimes loving yourself means letting go of the roles you were never meant to carry. If I could go back and change anything, I wouldn't, because every painful step led me here to a version of myself I actually recognize now. Not the fixer, not the extra, just me. And for the first time in my life, that's more than enough. People talk about forgiveness like it's a moment, one big release, one dramatic turning point. But for me, it didn't come with a grand gesture. It came in fragments. Like when I stopped replaying the fight in my head, or when I passed by a wedding boutique and didn't feel that stab of grief anymore. Forgiveness wasn't about letting Dylan or Kayla off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the emotional debt. I didn't want to carry their choices on my back for the rest of my life. I deserved to set that weight down. Some days I felt totally at peace. Other days, the anger bubbled back up and I let it. Because healing isn't linear. It curves and loops and pulls you back into lessons you thought you'd already learned. And that's okay. I stopped expecting myself to get it right all the time. I forgave my brother, not because he earned it, but because I didn't want bitterness taking up space where joy could live. I even forgave Kayla, in a distant, quiet way. She didn't need to know. It wasn't for her. It was for me. And maybe the hardest one of all. I forgave myself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for trying to earn love in all the old ways. That forgiveness changed everything. One morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, fresh from a run, hair messy, cheeks flushed, and I actually smiled. Not the performative kind. A real, full-bodied smile because I saw myself. And I liked who I saw. The version of me who used to bite her tongue, shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone, exhaust herself proving her value, she was gone. And the woman who replaced her, she didn't need validation. She was validation. I started showing up in rooms differently. Not louder, just more grounded. More clear. I spoke when I meant to. I said no without guilt. I didn't over-explain or apologize for existing. And the people who couldn't handle that version of me, they naturally drifted away. But the ones who stayed, wow, those connections deepened, got richer, more honest. Because when you show up as your full self, you invite people to do the same. That's what real intimacy looks like. Not dependency, not approval-seeking truth. And I realized I didn't want my old life back. Because the woman I became wouldn't fit inside it. If there's one truth I'd pass to anyone watching this, it's this. You don't owe your silence to people who benefit from your silence. You don't have to twist yourself into a softer shape just to stay included. And love that asks you to disappear isn't love at all. You are allowed to outgrow the roles they cast you in. You are allowed to walk away from tables where the conversation is about you, but never with you. And you are allowed to start again from scratch, with no one's permission but your own. For a long time, I thought being strong meant staying, enduring, tolerating, but real strength. It's saying, this isn't enough. I am allowed to want more. And then going out and creating it. If you're standing on the edge of that decision to stay or walk away, to speak or stay silent, I hope this story helps you choose yourself. Fully, unapologetically, gently, fiercely. Because the moment you stop asking, am I too much? And start asking, is this enough for me? Everything changes. If you've made it this far, thank you truly for holding space for this story. For letting it live inside you for a few moments, for breathing with me through the pain and the growth. Sharing this wasn't easy, but I believe with my whole heart that someone out there needed to hear it. Maybe you've been the peacekeeper in your family, quietly sacrificing your needs so others can stay comfortable. Maybe you've questioned your worth when people you loved chose silence over truth. Or maybe you've been standing on the edge of a boundary, terrified of what might happen if you finally drew it. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know you're not alone. Not even a little bit. This space, this channel, was created for these stories. The messy, human, real ones, the ones that hurt and heal at the same time. The ones that remind us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just finally saying, enough. So if this story touched something in you, drop a comment below. Share your experience or just let us know you're out there, listening. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps keep this space going, a place where healing and honesty are always welcome. And if you feel called to go even further, there's an option below this video called Super Thanks. It's a small way to show love for stories that spoke to your heart. Just click the button with the heart and $, and choose any amount that feels right. It helps keep the lights on and keeps these stories coming. And hey, maybe someone out there really needs the next one.